Chapter 1. The quiet hours before disappearance. There's a moment every night when the world slows down. Not fully asleep, not fully awake. Just quiet enough that you can hear things you normally miss. In cities, this moment comes after the last doors close, after footsteps fade, after the final light in a window clicks off and stays off. Tonight, imagine a city like that. The streets are still warm from the day. Stone walls hold the memory of voices. Somewhere, a dog curls up near a doorway. Someone turns in their sleep and pulls a blanket higher. Nothing feels wrong. Nothing feels urgent. And that is what makes these stories strange, because some cities never woke up again. This video is about places that went to sleep like any other night, and were gone by morning, not slowly, not with warning signs taped to the walls, but quietly, suddenly, completely, cities that did not know they were saying goodbye. Most of us think cities disappear with noise, with screams, with fire, earthquakes, or armies crashing through gates. But history is much calmer than that, much quieter, and honestly a little rude. Many cities vanished during ordinary nights. People ate dinner, locked their doors, said tomorrow instead of goodbye, and tomorrow never came. Picture it. A baker puts out the last loaf to cool. A guard leans on a spear board, counting stars. A child falls asleep halfway through a story. Somewhere, a lamp burns a little longer than usual. Then finally, darkness. Nothing dramatic happens at midnight. No music swells. No narrator clears his throat. Just sleep. That's what makes these lost cities feel so haunting now. They weren't abandoned in panic. They weren't packed up neatly. They were left midlife, beds unmade, tools still where hands last touched them, walls still painted, floors still swept. If cities had memories, these would be their dreams. And long after people were gone, the city stayed, waiting for footsteps that never returned. We like to think the past is loud and chaotic, but archaeology tells a softer story. Many ancient cities don't show signs of battle. No broken gates, no burned layers, no mass graves. Instead, they show absence, a door that was meant to open again, a road that leads nowhere. A city paused and never unpaused. It's almost like the people stood up one morning and said, "Yeah, let's just go," and then forgot to come back. Of course, it was never that simple. But at night, when the facts get quiet, it feels that way, because the night hides reasons. At night, you don't think about climate change or trade routes or political collapse. You think about tomorrow's weather, about food, about sleep. You don't think, this place will be a ruin one day. You think, I'll fix that crack in the wall later. And later becomes never. Some cities vanish because the earth moved. Some because the water left. Some because belief systems changed and people followed new ideas into new places. But many vanish without the people inside knowing they were part of history's last chapter. They just went to bed. Imagine being the final night watch in a city. You don't know it's your last shift. You don't stand taller. You don't memorize the skyline. You yawn. You stretch. You wait for morning. But morning doesn't come the way it should. Sometimes it comes as ash. Sometimes as silence. Sometimes it never really comes at all. What's left behind is strange. Cities are not meant to be empty. They feel wrong without people, like shoes with no feet, like echoes with no sound. Wind moves through doorways. Animals move in slowly, carefully, like they're not sure they're allowed. Plants grow where voices once were. Roots crack stone. Time does what time always does. It moves in and never explains itself. And centuries later, someone finds a place. They brush dirt from a wall. They uncover a street. They find a room and wonder who slept there last. Was the person dreaming? Were they comfortable? Did they know? We will never know. That's the uncomfortable part. History is good at dates and names. It's terrible at last thoughts. No one wrote. Tonight is the final night of our city. No one carved. We will not return. The silence came first. The forgetting came later. And that's why these stories are best told slowly, at night, when the world feels thin. because sleep connects us to them. Right now, as you listen, cities are falling asleep. Lights are turning off. People are setting alarms they won't hear for hours. Nothing feels fragile. But cities have always been fragile. They just hide it well. Stone feels permanent. Walls feel strong. But permanence is mostly confidence. Every city believes it will last. Until it doesn't. In the chapters ahead, we'll walk through places that vanished while life was still warm in their streets. We'll visit cities buried in ash. Cities swallowed by forests. Cities left behind by people who chose silence over survival. But for now, stay here, in this quiet moment. Imagine the sound of a city breathing in its sleep. The slow rise and fall of a place that doesn't know it's about to become a memory. No panic. No warning. Just rest. Because the most haunting disappearances don't happen with screams. They happen when everyone is asleep. Crescent Moon. Chapter 2. What makes a city vanish? When people hear the words Lost City, they usually imagine chaos. Fires everywhere. Walls falling. People running and shouting names that history forgot. But most cities don't vanish like that. Most of them leave quietly. Almost politely. Like they don't want to cause trouble. A city doesn't wake up one day and decide to disappear. It fades first. It hesitates. It gets tired. And usually nobody notices until it's too late. Cities are strange things. They're made of stone and wood. Sure, but really they're made of habits. Markets opening at sunrise. Paths worn into ground by feet that walk them every day. People knowing where to go without thinking. Once those habits break, a city starts to feel hollow. Maybe the river changes its mind and moves somewhere else. Rivers do that. No apology, no explanation. Suddenly the wells taste wrong. The fields struggle. Food arrives late. People don't panic at first. They adapt. Humans are very good at pretending things are fine. Then one family leaves. Then another, not dramatically. Just quietly at dawn. Someone says, "We'll come back when it's better." They usually don't. Sometimes the cause is climate. A few colder winters. A few longer droughts. Nothing exciting enough to write songs about. But over time, small changes stack up. Crops fail more often. Animals disappear. The city breathes a little heavier each year. Other times, it's the economy. Trade routes shift like wandering thoughts. Caravans stop arriving. Ports go silent. A city that once sat in the middle of everything suddenly sits in the middle of nowhere. Merchants leave first. Then craftspeople. Then anyone who could afford to. What's left is still a city, just a thinner one. Wars get blamed a lot, but they're not always a reason. Some cities show no signs of fighting at all. No burn layers. No smashed statues. Just absence. It's unsettling. Imagine setting down your cup and walking away forever. That's what these places feel like. Disease can empty a city faster than any army. Invisible. Quiet. Terrifying in a very boring way. People stop gathering. Shops close early. Doors stay shut longer each day. Nobody announces the end. They just stop coming outside. Then there's belief. Belief is powerful enough to build cities, and powerful enough to empty them. When religions change, cities move. When gods move, people follow. A sacred place can lose its meaning overnight. Temples become decoration. Rituals feel awkward. No one says it out loud, but everyone feels it. This place isn't anymore. And so they leave. Sometimes cities vanish because they grow too complex. Too many systems. Too many things that must work perfectly. Water channels. Food storage. Power structures. When one piece fails, it pulls another down with it. Then another. Then the whole thing sighs and gives up. Modern cities pretend they're different. They are not. They're just louder about it. One of the strangest things archaeologists find is how orderly many abandoned cities are. Houses still aligned. Streets still clean. Tools still usable. It's not the look of panic. It's the look of people who thought they had time. And maybe they did. Just not enough. There's a moment in every disappearing city when staying becomes harder than leaving. That moment often comes at night. In the dark, Doubts get louder. The future feels heavier. The idea of change feels easier than the idea of fixing everything. Someone lies awake and thinks, what if we just go? And the idea doesn't feel crazy anymore. Cities don't usually vanish all at once. They thin out. They exhale people. But history compresses that process into a single sentence. The city was abandoned. As if everyone stood up together and walked away in perfect agreement. Reality is messier, quieter, more human. A city vanishes when enough people stop believing in tomorrow there. Stone doesn't hold a city together. People do. And when the people leave, the city becomes a shell with good posture. In the next chapter, we'll visit a place where there was no slow fade, no hesitation, no second thoughts. A city that went to sleep under a normal sky and woke up under falling ash. For now, let the idea settle. Lost cities are not failures. They are decisions, sometimes forced, sometimes chosen, and almost always made in silence. Take a breath. We're just getting started, Crescent Moon. Chapter 3, Pompeii, a city frozen in sleep. Pompeii was not supposed to end. That's important to understand. It wasn't a dying city. It wasn't poor. It wasn't forgotten. Pompeii was busy, loud, and very confident about tomorrow. On the day before everything changed, people argued in the streets. They complained about prices. They laughed in bathhouses. They wrote jokes on walls because Romans loved graffiti. Life was normal, annoyingly normal. Mount Vesuvius stood nearby, quiet and polite like it always had. It looked more like a hill than a monster. No smoke, no drama. People lived near it for generations. If the mountain was dangerous, it was very bad at showing it. That night, Pompeii went to sleep like any other. Doors were closed. Food was saved for morning. Oil lamps burned low. Some people slept deeply. Some didn't. Cities never fully sleep. Then the ground changed its mind. Not in a movie way. No instant explosion. No giant fireball. At first, it was confusion. A sound. A shake. Did you feel that? By morning, the sky had turned wrong. Ash began to fall, soft at first, like dirty snow. People stepped outside and looked up, squinting. Still, many stayed. This is the part history doesn't like to admit. People don't run immediately. They wait. They hope. They tell themselves it will stop. Pompeii tried to sleep through the problem. Ash piled up on rooftops. Streets disappeared inch by inch. Breathing became work. Some people fled early and survived. Others stayed too long. Not because they were foolish. Because leaving your home is hard. Eventually, the air itself became deadly. Hot gas moved faster than thought. Faster than prayer. And then nothing. No sound. No city. Pompeii didn't collapse into ruins. It was sealed. Houses stayed standing. Rooms stayed arranged. Cups stayed on tables. People were caught exactly where they were. Sleeping. Running. Holding each other. The city didn't decay. It paused. For centuries, Pompeii slept under ash. Protected from weather. Hidden from memory. Above it, the world changed. Empires rose. Empires fell. Below it, Pompeii waited. When it was finally uncovered, it shocked everyone. Not because it was destroyed, but because it felt alive. Bread still in ovens. Paint still bright on walls. Footprints frozen in streets. It was like the city had just stepped out for a moment. Pompeii reminds us of something uncomfortable. Disaster doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives while you're deciding whether to stay in bed a little longer. The people of Pompeii didn't know they were living in their final hours. They thought they were living in a normal day that went slightly wrong. And that's why their city feels so close to us now, because we do the same thing. We assume tomorrow is guaranteed. We assume the ground beneath us agrees. Pompeii teaches us that history doesn't end with a warning bell. Sometimes it ends with sleep. In the next chapter, we'll visit a city that faced the same mountain and somehow left in time. For now, let Pompeii rest. It has already told us enough, Crescent Moon. Chapter 4, Akrotiri, the Minoan city that left no bodies. Akrotiri feels different from Pompeii right away. Pompeii is loud, frozen in panic. Akrotiri is quiet, almost polite. It sits on the island of Santorini, overlooking the sea. White stone, straight streets, painted walls filled with flowers, ships, and calm blue colors. This was not a poor place. This was a city that knew what it was doing. People here traded across the sea. They understood art, engineering, and comfort. Their houses had multiple floors. Some even had indoor plumbing, which honestly feels unfair for Bronze Age. Like Pompeii, Akrotiri lived near a volcano. And like Pompeii, that volcano eventually exploded. But this story bends in a strange way. When archaeologists uncovered Akrotiri, they expected bodies. They found none, not one. No skeletons in streets. No people trapped in rooms. No final moments frozen in ash. Just empty buildings. Furniture still in place. Storage jars lined up carefully. Stairs intact. Walls standing. It looks like everyone got up and left. And they didn't run in chaos. They prepared. Some rooms were cleared. Valuable items were taken. Doors were shut. This wasn't panic. This was a decision. Something warned them. Maybe earthquakes shook the island for days. Maybe the sea behaved strangely. Maybe the mountain finally showed its teeth. Whatever it was, the people of Akrotiri listened. They didn't argue with nature. They didn't wait to be sure. They packed. They boarded ships. They sailed away. And then the volcano erased the city anyway. The eruption was massive. Ash covered everything. The island changed shape. The sea swallowed part of the land. Akrotiri vanished beneath layers of volcanic dust, perfectly preserved, but without the people. That absence is eerie. Pompeii asks, why didn't they leave? Akrotiri asks, where did they go? We don't know. They might have settled elsewhere. They might have blended into other cultures. Their city disappeared, but they didn't. Akrotiri shows us a different kind of disappearance. Not a tragedy. Not a surprise. A calm exit. The city went asleep, and the people simply didn't come back. In the next chapter, we'll move to a place that didn't vanish in a single night, but still slipped away quietly. A city so large it once ruled the jungle itself. For now, imagine Akrotiri at night. Empty, peaceful, waiting for footsteps that will never return. Crescent Moon. Chapter 5, Angkor, when the water stopped flowing. Angkor was not just a city. It was a machine, a beautiful one, quiet and patient, built to move water exactly where it needed to go. And for centuries, it worked. At its peak, Angkor was one of the largest cities on Earth, bigger than medieval Paris, bigger than London, hidden in what looks today like endless jungle. From above, it was a pattern of temples, roads, canals, and reservoirs. From the ground, it felt eternal. People woke up to the sound of water moving, not crashing, not rushing, just flowing. That flow was everything. Angkor's rulers understood something very important. Control the water, and you control the city. Rain came hard and fast during monsoon seasons. Angkor caught it, stored it, moved it slowly across the land. During dry months, when the heat pressed down and the field should have failed, Angkor stayed green. The city did not depend on luck. It depended on engineering. Canals stretched for miles. Reservoirs were massive, almost lake-like. Every temple, every neighborhood, every rice field quietly relied on the same system. And when things worked, no one thought about it. That's how dependency usually feels. Invisible, comforting, dangerous. For a long time, Angkor felt unstoppable. Kings came and went. Temples rose. Stone faces stared calmly into the distance. Life continued. Then the weather began to change. Not dramatically. Not enough for people to panic. A few years of weaker monsoons. A few droughts that lasted longer than expected. A few floods that came at the wrong time. The water system was designed for balance, not extremes. When rains failed, reservoirs emptied. When storms hit too hard, canals collapsed under pressure. Repairs were made. Walls were rebuilt. The machine kept going. But each fix made the system a little more fragile. Imagine a clock where one gear slips, then another, still ticking, just not smoothly. Angkor didn't fall in a single night, but to the people living there, it probably felt sudden, because daily life depends on routines. Water arrives, fields grow, food appears. When those routines break, everything else follows. Rice harvest became unpredictable. Food storage became risky. Stress crept in quietly. People argued more, traveled more, left more often. Not forever, they told themselves, just until things improve. But improvement never fully came. The city thinned out, not empty, just quieter. Some temples saw fewer visitors. Some canals stopped being cleaned. Small failures stacked on top of each other. Then came the nights. Evenings in Angkor were once full of sound, voices, footsteps, ceremonies echoing off stone. Now, fewer lamps were lit. A temple might close its doors earlier than usual. Another might not open at all the next morning. No announcement, no final prayer, just absence. At some point, Angkor crossed an invisible line. The water system could no longer support the population it was built for. And without water, Angkor was just stone. People began to leave in larger numbers. Some followed new political centers. Some followed trade routes. Some followed the simple logic of survival. They did not tear the city down. They did not burn it. They walked away. Night fell over temples that would never be filled again. Stone corridors echoed once more, and then stopped, and then the jungle noticed. At first it was gentle. Vines crept along walls. Seeds settled into cracks. Roots tested the stone, slowly, politely. Stone resisted. For a while. But nature is patient. Trees grew taller. Roots grew stronger. Walls shifted. Temples that once dominated the land became part of it. From above, Angkor disappeared beneath green. From below, it felt like the city was being quietly folded back into the earth. Centuries passed. When explorers eventually reached Angkor again, they didn't find ruins in the usual sense. They found a city still standing, temples intact, roads visible, waterways traceable. It wasn't destroyed. It was abandoned by a system that stopped working. Angkor teaches us something uncomfortable. The greatest cities don't always fall because of enemies. Sometimes they fall because a system they depend on quietly fails. No drama, no explosion, just the water stopping. In the next chapter, we'll travel to a city made of stone towers, built without mortar, that once controlled trade across an entire region. And then, just as quietly was left behind. For now, let Angkor sleep, covered in leaves, held by roots, still breathing beneath the jungle crescent moon. Chapter 6, Cahokia, the vanishing city of North America. Cahokia was big, really big, much bigger than you'd expect for pre-Columbian North America. At its peak, it may have had tens of thousands of people, more than London in the same era. And it wasn't just big, it was organized, thoughtful, careful. The city was centered around huge mounds, some taller than a 10-story building. They weren't houses. They weren't forts. They were sacred spaces, ceremonial hubs, places to gather, celebrate, or maybe just look at the sky and feel small. Life in Cahokia must have been rhythmic. Children running between mounds, traders shouting deals, families cooking in clay ovens, someone somewhere banging a drum to announce the changing seasons. It sounds alive, and it was. Then, slowly it wasn't. Cahokia didn't vanish in a fiery explosion. It didn't crumble under invading armies. It faded, and fading is more unsettling than falling. First, there were fewer voices on the streets, fewer fires in homes, empty spaces where someone should be. We don't know exactly why. Maybe the Mississippi River changed course. Maybe crops failed repeatedly. Maybe social systems cracked under stress. Or maybe people just decided it was time to leave. We see the evidence in absence. Mounds left unused. Buildings empty. Tools left where they last touched hands. Imagine walking through Cahokia in its final years. The market stalls are still set up, but no one comes to trade. Children's toys lie in the dirt untouched. The drums are silent. It wasn't sudden. It was gradual. But to the people, the moment when the city felt empty enough to leave, that moment must have felt like the end of everything. Because humans don't abandon routines lightly. Some families may have left first. Others followed later, unsure at first, then convinced by necessity. They didn't take the city with them. They just walked away. And Cahokia waited. For decades, maybe centuries, it stayed as it was. Mounds rising silently. Paths still pressed into the soil. The Mississippi whispering nearby. Archaeologists visiting centuries later would find a city frozen in absence. Not destroyed. Not dramatic. Just gone. Cahokia is a lesson in impermanence. We often imagine cities disappearing with chaos, with noise and panic, with fire and battle cries. But some vanish quietly, like breath leaving a room, like a candle going out when no one notices. And in that quietness, there's a strange beauty. A city so large, so important, reduced to whispers in the wind. You can almost feel it exhaling. Cahokia reminds us that abandonment isn't always failure. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's a choice. People left to live elsewhere. The city stayed behind, waiting, silent, watching. And now, when we stand on its mounds, we don't hear the chaos of the past. We hear the calm, the rhythm of a city that once thrived and quietly stepped aside. Cahokia slept, and the world moved on. Chapter 7, Mohenjo-Daro, a civilization that walked away. Mohenjo-Daro was neat, way too neat for comfort. Imagine streets in perfect grids, houses built with baked bricks, all the same size, water running through canals underground, bathrooms inside homes. Yes, bathrooms. People walked along straight roads. Trade and routine hummed like a well-oiled machine. Everything was planned. Everything had a place. And yet it ended, not with an invasion, not with fire, not with earthquakes, at least none that we know of. Mohenjo-Daro vanished because it was abandoned, slowly, organically. And that's the strangest kind of disappearance. Imagine living in a city like this. You wake up, take your morning bath, step onto the same straight street you've walked for years. Everything looks normal. Everything feels secure. And then, quietly, things start to change. Maybe the river shifted slightly. Maybe crops didn't grow like before. Maybe trade slowed. Maybe people got tired. You notice one neighbor leaving. Then another. The streets feel emptier. Fewer voices in the square. Life goes on, but it's quieter. And at some point you realize the city you know isn't sustainable anymore. It cannot hold everyone. It cannot feed everyone. So you walk away. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just one family, then another. The city waits patiently. It doesn't collapse. It doesn't crumble. It simply becomes a memory waiting to be discovered. Mohenjo-Daro teaches something profound. You don't need fire to erase a civilization. You just need time, choice, and circumstances beyond control. And sometimes the most remarkable cities leave the world without a scream. They don't burn. They don't fall. They just walk away, leaving their streets, their walls, their careful order for nature and history to ponder. When archaeologists found it centuries later, they didn't find bodies in panic. They didn't find smashed bricks. They found a city that had been alive and then simply gone, like a dream you almost remember. Mohenjo-Daro reminds us that disappearance can be calm, almost polite, a quiet exhale of life. And that's why some lost cities haunt us more than any disaster, because they weren't destroyed. They were just left behind. Chapter 8, The Deserted Towers of Great Zimbabwe. Great Zimbabwe was impressive. Stone towers, massive walls, perfectly built and not a single nail in sight. Everything stacked carefully, perfectly balanced. It was a center of trade, wealth, and culture. People brought gold, ivory, and other treasures from faraway lands. The city was alive with voices, footsteps, and deals whispered in the sun. And then it was gone. No armies smashed the walls. No volcanoes buried it in ash. It just emptied. Maybe the land couldn't support everyone anymore. Maybe resources ran out. Maybe leaders lost their grip quietly over time. The last night in Great Zimbabwe probably looked like any other. A lamp flickered. Dogs curled by the doors. A child laughed too loudly in the courtyard. By morning, the city was thinner. Fewer voices, fewer lights, and eventually no voices at all. The stone towers still stand. They rise from the earth like monuments to patience, skill, and mystery. They remind us that some cities vanish without drama, not with chaos, but with quiet decisions. Nature started reclaiming the city, grass between stones, trees pushing roots against walls, wind moving through empty corridors like a curious visitor. Great Zimbabwe teaches a lesson we often forget. Civilizations can fade gracefully, sometimes leaving only stone and shadow. And sometimes that's enough to haunt us centuries later. Chapter 9, Nanmadol, the city built on the sea. Now imagine a city on water, not floating, exactly, but built atop hundreds of small artificial islands. Each island connected with stone causeways, a maze of basalt walls rising from a lagoon. This was Nanmadol, a ritual city, a palace, a mystery. People lived, ruled, and worshipped here. Stone pathways carried feet to temples. Water carried boats with food, gifts, and messages. And then it was abandoned, not violently, not suddenly, just gone. Historians think it may have been overpopulation, political shifts, or environmental changes. The water that sustained it may have turned against it. People walked away. The islands became quiet. The temples were empty. The lagoon waited patiently. The stones did not complain. The sea lapped against the walls as if it were saying, "I'll keep it for now." Nanmadol is eerie because it's half dream, half reality. The city is there, but empty. A maze of streets with no feet. A palace with no voices. And the beauty is, the city was never completely destroyed. It's a reminder that some cities leave silently. Not with fire, not with collapse, but with slow disappearance. Chapter 10, the Maya cities. When the forest took over, the Maya built incredible cities. Temples scraping the sky. Palaces full of carved stone. Ball courts, plazas, marketplaces, all alive with people, colors, and ritual. And then the forest came back. It wasn't one night. It wasn't dramatic. The cities faded over decades, centuries even. Droughts may have made food scarce. Wars may have weakened authority. Religion may have shifted, and people followed new gods and new cities. But what's remarkable is how slowly it happened. Temples still stood. Streets still existed. The carvings remained, watching. Children played fewer games. Markets quieted. Lamp fires flickered less. Then one day they were gone. No crowds in the plazas. No footsteps on the stairs. Just temples, still proud, surrounded by growing vines. The forest doesn't rush. It doesn't demand attention. It waits. It grows. And slowly it reclaims. The Maya cities are reminders that nature and time are patient. That even the greatest human constructions are temporary. And that disappearance doesn't always roar. The temples now whisper. Leaves rustle through plazas. Monkeys swing where priests once walked. The cities sleep again, as they have for centuries, waiting for someone quiet enough to notice. Chapter 11, Skarabrae, the stone village buried by sand. Skarabrae isn't just a village. It's a memory pressed into stone. A place where Neolithic life unfolded quietly, day after day, as it had for centuries, until it didn't. Imagine waking up here. You're in northern Europe. The wind is sharp and cold outside, brushing against low stone walls. Inside, the hearth glows warmly. The smell of morning meals drifts through the small rooms. Children stretch and yawn, their feet patting against the cold stone floor. Some are already playing with pebbles or carved sticks, inventing games that will never be written down. Families move through the village in familiar routines. Someone tends the fire. Someone else mends a basket or sharpens a tool. You can almost hear the quiet conversations, the occasional laugh, the soft thump of a door closing. Life is simple, yes, but full. Every task matters. Every routine is important. The people of Skarabrae are alive in a careful, measured rhythm. Then the wind begins to change. Not in a dramatic storm, not in a single terrifying night. Just slowly, quietly, the weather begins to press against life. Sand drifts into corners. The sea grows more restless. Storms arrive earlier, linger longer, and people adapt. They build walls higher. They repair roofs. They gather more food. They tell stories to pass the long nights. But something has shifted, and one by one, families start to leave, not in panic, not in chaos, just quietly, carefully, taking what they can carry, leaving behind homes, tools, benches, and hearths. Imagine the last night in Scarabray. The children are asleep. Dogs curl in corners. A fire flickers in a stone hearth, throwing soft shadows on the walls. The wind hums outside, tugging at doors and whispering across the rooftops. In the morning, silence. Empty rooms. Closed doors. No footsteps on the streets. And then, over the years, the sand comes, filling rooms, covering benches. Hearths, windows, and pathways slowly disappear beneath the blanket of time. Scarabray sleeps under the sand, protected, preserved, waiting. Centuries later, when archaeologists found it, they felt like intruders in a paused world. Stone walls stood as they had for thousands of years. Benches and shelves still held the remnants of everyday life. It was as if the people had just stepped outside for a moment and never returned. Scarabray is cozy and haunting at the same time. It reminds us of warmth, of family life, of firelight glowing in the cold. And yet it whispers of absence, of quiet disappearance, of a world abandoned without drama. The village teaches us something subtle. Not every end is violent. Not every city vanishes in smoke or chaos. Sometimes people leave slowly, gently, politely, and the city sleeps, waiting for someone to remember it. So, imagine walking through Scarabray now. Feel the wind. Smell the faint smoke of long-extinguished fires. Hear the echoes of children laughing. See the stone benches, the low doorways, the empty hearths. It's quiet. It's still. It's haunting. And in that haunting, there is beauty. The stone village buried by sand becomes a story, a memory, a lesson, a reminder that sometimes disappearance is gentle, sometimes it's intimate, sometimes it leaves you wondering what it was like to live there one quiet day at a time. Crescent Moon, Chapter 12, Ani, the city of 1,000 churches. Ani once sparkled like a jewel in the mountains. It was called the city of 1,000 churches, and for good reason. Stone spires rose toward the sky, rooftops shimmered under the sun, and cobbled streets hummed quietly with life. Imagine walking through Ani at dusk. Merchants close their stalls, laughing softly as they count coins and pack their goods. Children race each other down narrow alleys, shouting and giggling before tripping over their own feet. The smell of bread and roasting meat floats from kitchens tucked behind stone walls. Priests move silently between temples, carrying the quiet weight of tradition. It all feels ordinary, comfortable, safe, and yet, somewhere in the background, Ani is fragile. Earthquakes shake walls. Trade routes shift. Leaders rise and fall. The rhythms that once held the city together begin to waver. But the people do not notice immediately. Life is too busy. A child's laughter. A bell toll. A loaf of bread cooling on a windowsill. The city carries on. Then one day, houses begin to empty. One family leaves for safety. Another moves to find opportunity elsewhere. The market has fewer voices. The plazas feel quieter. The spires still reach for the sky, but fewer eyes gaze up in wonder. And Ani waits. It does not collapse. It does not crumble. It stands tall, proud, patient, like a city that knows it will outlast the people who built it. Imagine the last night in Ani. The bells are silent. Windows glow faintly for a few remaining families. Dogs curl up in doorways. A lamp flickers before fading completely. By morning, empty streets. Closed doors. Silent churches. The city is not destroyed. It is just gone. Ani teaches something gentle, almost uncomfortable. Cities are only alive while people are inside them. Stone remembers. Walls remain. But voices, laughter, footsteps, those are fleeting. And Ani whispers to us across centuries. Even the grandest human creations can be abandoned, even when they look eternal. When historians rediscovered Ani, it felt like stepping into a pause moment. The buildings were magnificent. The streets still wound their way through the city. Temples and churches held shadows and echoes. And yet, no one was there. No laughter. No arguments. No smell of baking bread. Just the quiet, waiting and the faint hum of history. Ani is haunting because it was ordinary. People lived their lives, unaware that their city would one day sleep forever. They went to bed, ate meals, told stories, and left until there was no one left. Walking through Ani today, you can almost hear their steps. The city exhales. It tells stories softly, without urgency or anger. And as you leave, you realize the most haunting disappearances are not violent, not dramatic, not chaotic. They are gentle, polite, intimate, and somehow infinitely sad. Ani slept, and it waited for us to remember. Crescent Moon, Chapter 13, When Cities Choose Silence. Not every lost city is destroyed. Not everyone is burned, invaded, or buried by storms. Some cities just stop. They don't scream. They don't collapse. They don't fight. They walk away quietly. It's strange to think about. A city that vanishes without a disaster, without drama, without warning. The streets stay empty. The buildings stand. The lamps go out. Day after day, fewer people walk the roads. Fewer voices echo in the plazas. The markets are quiet. The temples are empty. The city is still alive, in stone and memory, but its heartbeat has slowed and then stopped. One day, no one is left. This doesn't happen in a single night. It happens in small steps. A family leaves for better land. A merchant follows a new trade route. Children grow up and don't return, and the city waits. Stone walls remember. Streets remain. Even wind and rain seem to whisper through the empty squares, carrying hints of laughter that once filled the air. Walking through these abandoned cities, you realize how intimate disappearance can be. It's quiet. It's calm. It's almost polite. Some cities vanish because nature demands it. Some because humans make choices. Some because both conspire in slow, patient steps. But the lesson is the same. A city is only alive when people are inside it. Once they leave, the silence becomes permanent. And in that silence, there is beauty. You can imagine families sharing meals one last time. Children playing in the sun, unaware that the next morning, their city will be smaller. People carrying baskets, tools, and memories, leaving stone walls behind like a gift to the future. Silence is haunting, but it is also tender. It teaches us about patience, about impermanence, about how even the greatest human creations can vanish gently, without shouting, without violence, and without fear. These cities do not demand attention. They do not announce their absence. They simply wait. And if you listen closely, you can hear them. The empty streets tell stories. The walls whisper secrets. The plazas hum with echoes of life long gone. In that quiet, the world slows down. And perhaps that is the most important lesson. Disappearance doesn't have to be tragic. It can be peaceful. It can be deliberate. It can be gentle. Cities that choose silence remind us that endings are not always loud. Sometimes they're intimate. Sometimes they are human. Sometimes they are eternal. And tonight, as we imagine these cities sleeping, their lessons linger. Stone and memory breathe quietly. The last lamps fade. The streets fall silent. And in that silence, we find a story worth remembering. Crescent Moon, Chapter 14, What the Sleeping Cities Teach Us. By now, we've wandered through streets without footsteps. We've peeked into homes where fires no longer burn. We walk among stone walls that remember laughter, arguments, and quiet routines. And as we look at these sleeping cities, we begin to understand something profound. Cities are alive, not because of stone, not because of bricks or streets or temples. They are alive because of people, voices, footsteps, laughter, tears, stories told around a flickering fire or in the quiet of a bedroom. When the people leave, the heartbeat slows. And when the last person walks away, the city exhales. Some cities disappear violently. Pompeii, Akrotiri, flames and ash froze life in an instant. But most lost cities, they vanish slowly. Polite, patient, almost intimate in their disappearance. Cahokia, Mohenjo-daro, Angkor, Skara Ani, all these cities tell us the same quiet story. Life is fragile. It is delicate. It is temporary. The streets you walk today may vanish tomorrow. The markets, the plazas, the sound of footsteps, they may one day be echoes. And yet, there is beauty in that impermanence, because these cities also teach us about care, about human effort, ingenuity, and love. Every hearth, every carved stone, every bench, every spire, it was built with intention. People lived, worked, laughed, cried, and loved within these walls. They made mistakes. They faced hardship. They celebrated life. And even as they vanished, they left a trace, a gift for the future. Archaeologists, historians, travelers, and dreamers, like you, can now walk these streets in our imagination. We can smell the bread baking in Skara. We can hear the bell toll across Ani. We can see the waters lapping around Nan Madol. And in these sensory glimpses, these echoes of life, we feel connection. Even in absence, there is presence. Even in silence, there is a story. And that is the first lesson the sleeping cities teach us. Life is fleeting, but memory is persistent. But there's more. They teach us about observation. The people in these cities lived ordinary lives. They fished, farmed, traded, built, and told stories. They laughed, argued, and comforted one another. They noticed the little things: a river rising a bit higher, a wall cracking, a crop failing. And yet, sometimes they didn't notice enough. Sometimes the signs came too slowly, too subtly. And that's human. We are busy. We are distracted. We assume tomorrow will be like today. The lost cities remind us to pay attention, to notice the changes in our own lives, our communities, our world. Small shifts can become big ones if ignored. The water that stops flowing, the trade that dries up, the people who leave first, and the rest follow. It all begins quietly, and often it ends quietly too. Another lesson is resilience in impermanence. Even abandoned, these cities are still here. Stone walls stand. Mounds rise. Temples gaze silently at the sky. Nature has reclaimed its share. Vines through cracks, grass between cobblestones, trees leaning against walls. And yet the cities endure. They endure as memory, as story, as whispering lessons from the past. Their survival isn't about people. It's about the traces we leave. And that's comforting, isn't it? Even when our lives end or our communities change, our choices, our actions, our care, they leave marks. Not everything disappears entirely. Some things linger, waiting to be discovered, waiting to be remembered. The sleeping cities also teach us about silence. Silence is not always empty. In Ani, in Cahokia, in Skara, silence is full. It's full of memory of life once lived. It's full of lessons. It's full of the soft hum of stone, wood, and wind carrying stories long gone. And in that silence there is peace. Not every disappearance needs to roar. Not every ending needs chaos or drama. Some endings are gentle, polite, intimate, even beautiful. We often fear silence. But the lost cities show us that silence can teach. Silence can preserve. Silence can hold life in its memory. And if we listen, we can hear it. There is also a lesson in continuity. These cities vanished, yes, but they didn't vanish completely. They became inspiration. They became stories. They became lessons for us, centuries later, in quiet bedrooms or echoing lecture halls. We walk in their shadows. We imagine their streets. We see the children playing. We smell the hearth fires. We hear the laughter and footsteps. And in doing so, the cities are alive again, not as they once were. Of course, not fully, but in our minds, in our hearts, in our stories. They breathe, they speak, they linger. And finally, the sleeping cities teach us humility. No matter how grand we feel, no matter how permanent our achievements, no matter how confident we are in the durability of our creations, time is patient, nature is patient, And change is inevitable. Walls crumble, rivers shift, people leave, and the cities sleep. But in sleeping, they leave lessons, stories, memory, wonder, and that perhaps is their greatest gift. We think we are permanent. The cities remind us that we are not, but we are remembered, and that is enough. So tonight, as you imagine walking through these sleeping cities, take a deep breath, listen to the silence, feel the wind brushing empty streets, watch the shadows of trees stretch over abandoned walls, smell the faint smoke of long-dead hearts, hear the echoes of children playing, merchants haggling, bells tolling, and know that these cities are alive, in memory, in story, in the soft hush of night. The streets are empty, the homes are quiet, the lamps have faded, and yet the cities speak. They teach us patience. They teach us humility. They teach us that even in absence, there is presence. Even in silence, there is life. Even in endings, there is meaning. And if we listen carefully, we can learn everything we need to know. Crescent Moon. Chapter 15, The Last Lights Go Out. Every city has a last night. Not every city falls in flames. Not every city is swept away by flood or fire. Some cities just sleep. They close their doors quietly. They extinguish their lamps softly, and they breathe their last sigh without anyone noticing. Imagine a city at dusk, long ago. The market stalls are empty. Merchants have packed up for the night, counting their coins and moving home. Children run the last laps around the plaza, their laughter fading into the dark. Dogs curl in corners. The faint smell of baked bread lingers in the air. The streets are warm from the afternoon sun, now cooled under twilight. Nothing seems wrong. And yet, this will be the last night the city is alive. The last footsteps on cobblestones. The last voices in the plazas. The last lamps flickering in windows. Because tomorrow, the city will sleep forever. Some cities vanish violently with fire, ash, or war. We see those endings in Pompeii, Akrotiri, or cities lost to conquest. But many others, they disappear slowly. They vanish while the world outside keeps spinning. They vanish while people eat their meals, laugh at a joke, argue over minor things, or read by a dim lamp. They vanish while the sky turns from gold to indigo. They vanish while the first stars blink awake in the night. The last lights go out, one by one. Imagine walking through a city like this. The first homes are empty. The fire is gone from the hearths. A blanket of silence spreads over the streets. Then the marketplace is empty. The fountains run dry. The windows reflect only the moon. Temples are still. Church bells do not ring. Even the animals know something has shifted. They wander quietly, sniffing the air, finding new homes elsewhere. And the city waits. Stone walls remain. Pathways remain. Windows stare blankly at the sky. But the life that gave the city warm color and sound is gone. There's a peculiar magic in this absence, because the city remembers. Even when people leave, even when nothing moves, the city keeps a memory of its life. The stones, the streets, the walls, they hold echoes. They hold warmth. They hold laughter. They wait for someone quiet enough to notice. The last lights going out is not dramatic. There are no alarms, no cries, no panic. It is intimate. The last night in a city like Ani, Scarabray, or Angkor may have felt completely ordinary to its people. Children sleep. Dogs sleep. The baker counts coins. The priest walks to the temple. And yet, the threads of life begin to unravel slowly, almost imperceptibly. Families leave first. Some for safety. Some for opportunity. Some because the world outside is calling, quietly but insistently. Then others follow. A few remain, unsure why they are still here. Some linger out of habit, out of love for the streets they know. Some leave reluctantly, carrying only what they can manage. And at last, silence. In this silence, there is beauty. The city becomes a canvas. Shadows stretch across empty streets. The wind rustles over cobblestones. Birds perch on abandoned rooftops. And the quiet teaches us something essential. Life is temporary, but memory is eternal. We often measure cities by their walls, their buildings, their wealth. But cities are alive because of people. voices, footsteps, songs, stories. Take that away, and all that remains is stone, earth, and wind. Yet even in this absence, cities teach. They speak softly. They whisper stories of ordinary days, of families, meals, children playing, merchants haggling, lovers walking under the stars, of life in motion, which will never be repeated exactly the same way again. The last lights go out in a particular rhythm. One street first, one house, one lamp, then another. The plazas empty, the fountains dry, the ball courts, the marketplaces, the temples, the altars, all abandoned. And slowly, as the night grows deeper, even the grandest buildings fall into quiet. Imagine Anchor's water flowing no more, the jungle pressing in, slowly reclaiming stone temples. Or Mohenjo-Daro's streets, once full of life, now empty, waiting for footsteps that will never return. Or Skara Brae, buried beneath sand, the last fires long extinguished. All of them whisper the same truth. Nothing is permanent, but that is not tragic. It is gentle. Even as the last lamp flickers, there is warmth. Even as the streets empty, there is meaning. Even as silence falls, there is a story waiting to be heard. Cities that sleep forever remind us of something humans often forget. Life is fragile. Time is patient. Change is inevitable. And yet, even in endings, there is beauty, because these cities do not vanish entirely. They leave traces. Stone walls, cobblestones, benches, tools, carvings, evidence of life, of care, of human persistence. They leave us stories. We walk among the ruins today, imagining what it was like when the lamps still glowed. We see the glow of the hearth in Skara Brae, the spires of Ani reflected in morning sunlight, the water running through Anchor's canals, the streets of Mohenjo-Daro alive with merchants, children, laughter. And for a moment, they breathe again. We can almost hear footsteps. We can almost smell the smoke from a fire. We can almost feel the warmth of human life that once filled the empty rooms. The last lights went out centuries ago, but in our imagination, in our memory, in our stories, the cities are alive again. The final lesson is gentle but powerful. Endings do not have to roar. They do not have to explode in fire or flood. They can be quiet, polite, even beautiful. We live our lives thinking permanence is real. We think walls will last. Rivers will never change. Cities will always hum with life. But the sleeping cities remind us nothing is permanent. And that is okay. Because even in absence, there's presence. Even in silence, there's life. Even in endings, there's meaning. So as we imagine these last nights, we feel something like awe. Awe for the families who lived ordinary lives in extraordinary places. Awe for the streets that carried footsteps and stories. Awe for the lamps that burned, the hearths that glowed, the voices that laughed, whispered, and sang. We realize the world is full of sleeping cities. Cities that vanish while people sleep. Cities that wait quietly for someone to remember. Cities that teach patience, humility, and the fleeting nature of life. And if we are quiet enough, we can listen. We can hear their whispers. We can see their memories flicker in our mind. We can feel their presence. Even when the streets are empty, the last lights go out. The city exhales. The wind moves through empty streets. The animals wander. The trees sway. The fountains dry. The world keeps spinning. And somewhere in the night, a child in a modern city yawns. A lamp flickers. And the echo of 1,000 vanished cities seems to whisper, "Remember us. Walk gently. Live fully. And tell our stories." And tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine the last lamp flickering one final time. The streets are empty. The doors are closed. The laughter has faded. But the story remains. It lingers in the stone, the sand, the water, the jungle, the wind. It lingers in you. And that is enough. Crescent moon.